You are alone in a parked car at night. The engine is off. The street is quiet. The only light comes from a nearby street lamp, buzzing softly in the dark. Then outside your window, two children approach. They are wearing heavy hooded sweatshirts, their faces partially hidden in the shadow. They stop beside the car, close enough for you to hear the soft tap of their knuckles against the glass. They ask for a simple favor: a ride home, a phone call, a place to wait. Nothing about the request should feel threatening. They are children. You are supposed to help children. But before you can fully process what is happening, something inside you tightens. A wave of dread rises through your body with no explanation. Something in you says, "Do not open the door." In stories of the black eyed children, witnesses often describe this sudden sense of fear before they even realize what is wrong with the children standing in front of them. The body reacts before the mind has a reason. And when the eyes finally catch up, the horror comes into focus. In 1996, a Texas journalist named Brian Bethel claimed to have experienced something like this in Abilene, Texas. He said he was sitting in his parked car using the light from a nearby movie theater marquee to write a check. Then two young boys appeared beside his driver's side door. They were perhaps 10 to 14 years old, ordinary at a first glance, young enough to seem harmless, close enough to make leaving awkward. Bethel cracked the window, expecting them to ask for spare change. Instead, they asked for a ride. They said they wanted to go to their mother's house to get money for a movie. But Bethel noticed something strange in the way they spoke. Their words felt rehearsed. Their voices sounded too formal, too controlled, almost as if they were repeating lines they had memorized. As they kept talking, Bethel felt an intense and irrational dread take hold of him. Then he noticed the movie they claimed they wanted to see had already started. The boy at the window became more insistent. He offered calm reassurances. They had no weapons. They were just two little kids. But the reassurances made the situation worse. When Bethel finally looked directly into the boy's face, he saw what his body seemed to have understood before his mind did. The boy's eyes were completely black. No white sclera, no colored iris, no visible human softness. Just two dark, empty shapes reflecting the light of the theater marquee. As the boy demanded to be let into the car, Bethel threw the vehicle into reverse and fled. That account would become the seed of one of the internet's most enduring urban legends. The black eyed children may wear modern clothes, but their life as a cultural phenomenon began somewhere else entirely. Not in an old village, not in a forgotten graveyard, not in a medieval folk tale, but in the glow of a 1990s computer screen. Bethel claimed the encounter happened in 1996, but the legend's digital footprints begins between 1997 and 1998, when his account began circulating through early internet spaces, Usenet groups, paranormal mailing lists, and message boards. It arrived at the perfect moment. The internet was still young enough to feel strange, text based enough to feel intimate, and anonymous enough to feel haunted. Stories did not need photographs or video to spread. They only need a good first sentence, a strange detail, and someone willing to forward them. The black eyed children became one of the early monsters of the digital age, and like many things born online, the story did not stay fixed for long. It changed as it traveled. What began as one man's claimed encounter in a Texas parking lot became a modern mythology with rules, patterns, and consequences. The internet did not simply preserve the story, it helped build the monster. This is not just a story about children with black eyes. It is a story about what the internet does to fear. As more black eyed children's stories appeared, a pattern began to form. The details changed, but the shape of the encounter remained strangely consistent. The children are usually between 6 and 16 years old. They often travel in pairs. They appear at night, approaching isolated people at front doors, car windows, empty streets, or gas stations. Their voices are described as flat, formal, or strangely adult, and they always ask for something simple: a ride, a phone, shelter from the cold, or permission to come inside. The internet did not just share a ghost story, it built an anatomy for an urban legend. The horror is not only in how the children look, it is in the creeping realization that the victim has wandered into a script. There is a knock, there is a request, there is a feeling of dread, there is the slow recognition that something is wrong. And then there's the choice: do you open the door? The scariest part of the Black Eyed Children legend is not that a monster might break down your door in the middle of the night. It is the realization that in many versions of the story, the children do not cross the boundary until they are invited. They ask, and that detail matters. A threshold is not just a piece of architecture, it is a border between the known and the unknown. Inside is light, warmth, and the illusion of control. Outside is darkness, weather, and whatever waits beyond the glass. The black eyed children appear precisely at the line between those two worlds: the porch, the window, the passenger door. The place where the victim still has one choice left. Horror does not come through violence, it comes through permission. This legend echoes one of the most familiar rules in Gothic fiction: the supernatural visitor who requires an invitation to enter. But the black eyed children are not vampires. The point is not that they belong to the same mythology. The point is that the story uses the same terrible pressure. They do not overpower you, they pressure you. They use politeness, pity, and social discomfort. They turn basic human decency into a vulnerability. The door stays closed until you decide to open it. And that is what makes the legend feel so intimate. The threat is not only outside the house, it is inside the moment of hesitation. Why does this monster look like a child? Not a shadow, not an animal, not a corpse, not a horned thing from the dark. A child. The Black Eyed Children legend works especially well in a culture that treats children as innocent, vulnerable, and morally protected. Our modern idea of childhood, fragile, pure, and in need of protection, is not as timeless as it feels. Across history, the cultural meaning of childhood has changed. But in the world most of us recognize today, a child at the door is not supposed to be a threat. A child is supposed to be the one protected from threats. That is the trap. By masking danger as helplessness, the legend weaponizes empathy. It asks the viewer to imagine a terrible inversion. What if the thing you're supposed to protect is the thing you should fear? This is why modern writers often compare the Black Eyed Children to older changeling folklore. Not because the legends are the same, not because Black Eyed Children directly descend from changelings, but because they share a familiar anxiety: the fear of the false child, the familiar thing quietly replaced by something else. In changeling stories, the terror is not always that a monster arrives at your door. Sometimes the horror is that the monster is already in the cradle, wearing the face of someone you love. The Black Eyed Children bring that fear to the edge of the modern home. They look like children. They speak like children. They ask for help like children. But the eyes betray the disguise. Something is wearing the shape of innocence, and it wants to come inside. The terror of the Black Eyed Children is not only supernatural, it is visual. Human beings rely heavily on faces. We read expressions almost instantly. We look at the mouth, the brow, the tilt of the head. But above all, we look at the eyes. The eyes tell us where someone is looking, what they may be feeling, whether their attention is fixed on us, and whether the person in front of us seems present, aware, and human. In Black Eyed Children stories, that signal is erased. The face remains human enough to recognize, but the eyes are wrong. Without the white of the eyes, one of the face's most important social signals becomes harder to read. The gaze becomes unclear. Emotions become harder to place. Intent becomes hidden. And that is where the uncanny begins. The figure in front of you is not obviously a monster. It is almost normal. It has the proportions of a child. It has a voice. It asks a question. But one detail breaks the illusion, and the mind does not know where to put it. It is not fully human. It is not fully inhuman. It stands in the narrow, uncomfortable space between recognition and rejection. We stare into the face, searching for the signs we normally use to understand another person. And the story gives us nothing back, only a dark, unreadable void. In older folklore, stories moved slowly. They passed from mouth to mouth, village to village, family to family. A tale might take generations to cross a border, and every retelling would leave a mark. The internet changed that. Online, a story can become folklore in real time. The web became a global campfire, and the Black Eyed Children were perfect for it. The story was simple enough to remember, specific enough to feel real, and flexible enough for anyone to add their own encounter. So the legend grew. Anonymous users took the original pattern and began pushing it further. If children ask to come inside, what happens if someone says yes? That question gave the myth its next layer. Stories like the Vermont Blizzard account introduced darker consequences. In that version of the lore, an elderly couple let a strange boy and girl into their home during a snowstorm. The power fails. The children's black eyes are revealed. Then they disappear. Afterward, the story adds tragedy: missing or dead pets, sudden illness, nosebleeds, and a cancer diagnosis. These details are not documented events, they are anonymous internet lore. Modern campfire tales built around the same central fear. But they show how legends evolve. The first story creates the visitor. The later stories create the punishment. At first, the horror is the knock. Then the internet asks, what if you open the door? But when we return to the beginning of the Black Eyed Children legend, there is one strange detail that makes the story even more unsettling. Skeptics point to a digital coincidence in the archives of Usenet. On the same day Brian Bethel posted his Black Eyed Kids encounter, he also published a separate essay about magic. In that essay, he reportedly wondered whether a frightening entity could be given shape through a collective belief in fear, using the childhood ritual of Bloody Mary as an example. This does not prove the encounter was invented. It does not prove Bethel created a hoax. But it does make the Black Eyed Children a strange case study in internet myth making. A man posts a story about a terrifying encounter. On the same day, he reflects on whether shared belief can give form to an entity. Then the internet does the rest: copies it, repeats it, mutates it, adds rules, adds consequences, adds witnesses, until the story becomes something larger than the person who first told it. The irony is difficult to ignore. The internet seemed to do exactly what the essay imagined. It took an idea, repeated it, reshaped it, and gave it life beyond its original author. Maybe Bethel saw something that night in Abilene. Maybe he misread a strange encounter through fear and memory. Maybe the internet found the perfect shape for a monster and simply refused to let it die. Whatever the answer, the Black Eyed Children show how quickly a modern myth can be born when fear has a network. The Black Eyed Children may be a digital ghost story. They may be a strange case study in internet folklore. They may be nothing more than an urban legend built from old fears wearing modern clothes. But the reason they endure is not only because of the black eyes. It is because the legend touches something deeper: the fear of corrupted innocence, the fear of the familiar made strange, the fear of a face that should be safe but is not, the fear of a boundary we are pressured to open. The story forces us to confront the limits of our compassion. Most of us want to believe we would help a child in need. Most of us want to believe kindness is always safe. But the Black Eyed Children ask a darker question. What happens when the face of innocence becomes a threat? What happens when we can no longer trust our own empathy? The monster is standing on the porch. It looks like a child. It is asking to come in. Will you open the door? And And if you like that video, please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more videos in the future. Thank you.